Welcome to our Instagram information meeting. This is for California, and we are so excited to be partnering with California Co-op Connect. They are working hard to create a community on the West Coast where families can join in and get to know what their options are outside of public or private school. Thanks for having us, Donna.
Yes, welcome everyone. We're so excited to have Classical Conversations with us, just giving parents another option for when you decide to pull your children out, and another something for your toolbox to add to your bag of tools. And we are so very excited to have them join us today. And I'm going to introduce Amanda at this time.
Hi, I am so glad to be here. And I love the word toolbox because that's one of the things that we're doing when we're home educating is we're helping our kids have tools for a lifetime. So I'm excited to be here and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. We'll just give everybody a few more minutes to pop in and we'll get started. But as we begin, if everybody that's here now would go to their view on their Zoom meeting and just go to gallery just to see everybody here right now. And one of the big components of what we're creating is to let everybody know that you are not alone. We are here to support you, and we will continue to bring these guests to you. And you could just see the different faces here. If you guys want to turn on your cameras, fine. If you don't, that's fine too. But you are not alone. And we will continue to share homeschooling and how it is possible for every single one of you to do this for your family, and the value of spending this quality time with your kids, especially with what we're going through in the state of California right now. So thank you all for being here, and know that you are not alone, and our hearts go out to you, and that's why we're doing this.
Well, that was beautiful, Donna. All those faces, all those smiles, what an encouragement. We are not alone. And I am actually sitting in California, and just real quick, I have 2 kids. And one has graduated college. So if you thought, can you homeschool and go all the way through college, get somebody into college? The answer is yes. I've got the been there, done that sticker. And then I have one who I started homeschooling at 4. He's 15 and a half. And currently the magnet on the side of my car is student driver screaming parent. So that as we're learning to drive on these California highways, somebody gives us a little bit of space. So that's who I am and where I'm sitting. And I'm so glad you're here to talk with us about an option you might have for your kids. So one of the things that I would love to say to you is that you are not alone. And you will notice that I am showing a screen right now that has homeschool with a friend. We believe that you need to do this with others. We are not meant to be alone. We know that from the very beginning, we're not meant to be alone. And we are totally on board with We Are Not Alone, Donna. So we are so glad you're here. You're also, if you haven't been on a Zoom meeting before, which you probably have, given the last 18 months, or you want to get more information from us directly, go ahead in that chat log. Tell us who you are, where you are, and what your kids' ages are. And that will also help me point some things out that may be more relevant to you or not. The other thing we want to tell you is you're not alone. And one of the reasons we know you're not alone is that we are actually a Christian worldview organization, and we think God is with us. So I'm going to open in prayer before I get started, because we think God is with us and he listens to us and he wants to hear us. So I'm going to pray right now, and then we'll get started. Jesus Christ, we are grateful that you came and gave your life for us, and that you picked it back up again and sit in heaven. Thank you that you love kids, and that you know them by name, and you know the hairs on their head, and you know the hairs on the parents' heads. You know the mamas and the daddies, and you know what they're worrying about. Thank you that you've got us and that you give yourself to us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, the other thing I want to say to you is that I'm going to give a lot of words, and they'll be kind of fast, but you have a chat log. There are 2 people watching the chat log this morning. So if you have questions, you don't have to wait to ask them. You can just drop them in the chat log as you're going along, and I will get to this experience of answering it.
Hold on.
All right, so you notice I opened in prayer because we are a Christ-centered worldview organization. And the question we ask very first as a parent is, how can I give my children a truly Christian education? Because we think education is not just about the book learning, as you might think about, but it's about mind, body, and spirit. And we think the whole person is educated, and that it's such a gift to be able to do that. So we ask the question, how do we give our kids a truly Christian education? And one of the things we want you to know is that we believe truth, capital T, is required to inculcate, make it part of who you are, the very intricacies of your bones, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Now you see a blue grid on here, and this blue grid on here is actually a way of thinking about some of the most natural tools of learning. And we think that people are meant to learn things. And we think that makes it wonderful to be part of this journey of education for a parent and for a child. We have 3 ways we learn things. And the first way we learn things is grammar. That's a fancy word to mean the knowledge words of something. The knowledge words, the what's of it. So the first time I understood the real grammar effect in life was actually when my kids were super little. That this memorizing and reciting thing that some of us think is, oh, that might be a bad word or a banned word. It's not actually at a certain age and stage. Kids love the repetition. And the first time I realized this, and by the way, as you're listening to this, drop in the chat log what your favorite storybook that you read for bedtime is to your sort of 2 through 6 year olds, or if you can remember when you had 2 through 6 year olds, just drop that in the chat log. That'd be great. My husband, sent me a message saying, hey, I'd love to spend some time with you. We seem to be missing each other. And let's put the kids to bed a little faster tonight so that we can spend some time together. Well, I was all excited to have that happen because we had been missing each other. So as I'm reading the bedtime story with my kiddo, they stopped me because I had turned 3 pages all at once. And they said, you missed stuff. And I thought, But we read this story so often. And I said, so what does it say on those pages? And they were able to tell me exactly what was said on those pages. That repetition, they knew what was on those pages, but they liked the comfort of the rhythm of the repetition. During the grammar stage, when we get all those knowledge words, it's exciting. They like that repetition. And we want to fill them, and in terms of a Christian worldview, we want them to be filled with the scriptures, and we want that God's word would be hidden in their heart, plus a lot of other good things. Now, as they get a little bit older, they're coming to this dialectic, sounds like dialogue stage. They start to ask questions, ask big questions. And what they're really working on is the skill of understanding something better and making connections. We call that the dialectic stage. And this is the kind of stage when they make weird connections, and some of them are great and some of them aren't. And this is a beautiful stage, actually, where you start to see them come into their own. And then the final stage in our learning process that we talk about is the rhetoric stage. And that's where you and I are sitting right now. As adults, we're in the rhetoric stage. We want to be using wisdom. And in terms of wisdom, we really think that that means giving the right answer at the right time to all the people who ask the questions. And we see this exemplified in Paul when he walked in the marketplace in Athens. And he spent time looking around, and then he made a persuasive case for why he thought you should think Jesus was the person you should pay attention to. And that you can find that in Acts 17. This is characterized by skills of being persuasive, poetic, and expressive. That's our upper level teenagers, our juniors and seniors in high school. All right, so this is classical education. It's also Christian education. And I've just given you a flyby on some really quick words. And I know you didn't get it all, but that's okay. We'll explain a little bit more as we go along. By the way, in that chat log, there are some really great stories that I'm starting to see come up. My kids loved Hop on Pop because at that point, hopping on pop was usually in the option set. And there was a little bit of a happy wrestling time at the end of the day. I've switched the picture. And one of the reasons I switched the picture is we can forget, especially when we're leaving this formal schooling system, the really important magic key of play, because play sparks curiosity, and curiosity helps us learn for a lifetime. And I'm so grateful you're here because I think you're being curious right now. So this is one of those things that's beautiful, that we can spend time being trusting that when our kids are curious, they're starting to learn something wonderful. Now, I look at this picture of this little kid and I think, oh my goodness, there's going to be weeds to pick. That's an adult understanding, but what does the child see? The child sees, what happens when I blow it? Why does it fly? How far will they go? What am I going to do next? What do I imagine this to be? Is this Horton the elephant's little dandelion? All right, so these are the kinds of things that don't forget as a parent that play is such an important part. All right, so we have gotten to what I've just switched to was where our programs actually start. Kindergarten, 4 years old through 12 years old. You can see that in the front top of the page. The other word you see at the top of the page there is community. We do this together. You are not alone, and we spend time working together. And the way we work together in the community is we meet 1 day a week in community, 1 day a week only, so that you know what to do the other 4 days a week. We think the easiest way for you as a parent to succeed is to make it really sweet and wonderful, that you get to know your child and their learning style and the content all at the same time by watching them. And then you work through it the other 4 days a week. We think that's sweet and wonderful. We do this in community, and our communities meet 12 weeks in the fall and 12 weeks in the spring. And those 12 weeks are rich and wonderful, and they actually do a lot of play in them. But let me explain what that grid is in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. In our community, we are working on words, the knowledge words, that grammar stage in this time period. Now, how many of your kids ever spent time learning to sing any of the Mary Poppins song, including Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious? I can't see if you're nodding or not, but if you did not, if your kids saying supercalifragilistic, they can learn how to say that well before they learn that it's all the letters in the alphabet. And one of the things about the grammar words is we're going to do some wild and wonderful words. Like we're going to do the formula for the area of a triangle. My 4-year-old learned 1/2 base times height when he was 4. He could say it. Was he doing geometry at the time? No, he was not. Let me test you on that. But 1/2 base times height. But what we were doing at home is we were spotting triangles. We were counting the sides of a triangle. We were having a lot of fun doing things. But then now that he is doing his math, because he's what you'd call a sophomore in high school, he already has all the vocabulary. That makes doing the geometry now, not learning the foreign language, but just having fun with doing the actual process. So we start putting grammar, the knowledge of things, even before it's useful, into their toolkit. That was one of the things we talked about at the beginning. Oh, I should tell you, the other thing about this is it's light on your lifestyle. And what I mean by light on your lifestyle is that it's 3 hours that you're spending in your community. And then you have the freedom to spend time doing other things. In doing these other things, you could be doing tennis, you could be doing art, you could be helping at a food bank. Your child could be having all sorts of life-giving experiences. So one of the reasons we are light on the lifestyle is so that you can develop your child however their best interest is and however your family's interest is. All right, back to that grid. We are going to do, in 3 hours, we're going to do 5 crisp components. And one of the reasons I loved as a new homeschooling parent is that 5 things, I could keep track of 5 things because, you know, I have one hand and one hand's holding the child to keep them from crossing the street when they shouldn't. So I love just thinking of 5 things. The first of the 5 things that I'm going to tell you about is actually the opening session. And it isn't actually first of the 5 things. It's when all the parents get to know each other. Because just like we started this call with not being alone, We want our parents to know they're not being alone. So we start our opening sessions in our communities with all the parents together and all the students together. Because remember, if we're modeling to you what you're going to do the other 4 days at home, you have to be there in order to get it modeled to you. So we start with an opening session. The other thing we do here that I really love from a Christ-centered worldview is that parents and children are doing the Bible passage together. You know, our kids copy what they see us do. If they never see us do it, they don't believe we do it oftentimes. And so what I loved about seeing this happen in the community was that parents and kids were doing this. Yes, I agree, Crystal. I'm doing the early years first, kindergarten 4 through 12, and I'll take some more questions after that. You are doing great hanging in there. The other thing I loved about this most favorite time of getting to know the parents is each parent shared something special in their family. I am not a huge outdoors person. I am married to a literature professor. We don't spend huge amounts of outdoor times, even though California's weather is great. However, I really had kids that like the outdoors a lot. And one of the parents did a family presentation because they worked for the park services and they gave us the best hikes for families with kids with small legs. And my family shared some of the best early Shakespeare stories. Those are the kinds of things that are great. That happen in community. We get to share and not be alone and help each other as we go along. We then break down into rooms that are 8 students only. If your child felt overlooked, when you're only 8 students in a room, you're not going to be overlooked. And we spend time covering math, Latin, science, English, timeline. And by the way, have you heard of timeline before? Drop that in the chat log. History and geography. All right. I'm not seeing whether in the chat log anybody's heard of timeline, but let me talk about Latin. Yes, we do that thing called Latin. And if we had a lot of time, I'd ask you why you think we might do that. But now that I've asked you, you don't have to put it in the chat log, but I'll give you the 2 quickies why we do Latin. 1, because Latin is useful. And I think it's useful because of these 2 reasons. Useful because, wow, Latin follows its own rules and English does not. So when you're teaching kids language and how languages work, like gears in a machine, it's really helpful for them to have one that works normally. I saw that. The other reason is that, actually, I'm going to put 3 reasons in, not just 2. The second reason for doing Latin is that I had a dad who was retraining in his career, and he saw us doing Latin. He said, oh, my anatomy course, because he was going into being a licensed nurse practitioner, he said would have been so much easier if I understood the Latin. So yes, it's useful in the sciences. We actually have also people who are in the arts, and there's a lot of Latin in the arts. And finally, if your kids are interested in the Romance languages, anything coming out of that Latin-based languages, this gives them more root for whether it's Italian, Spanish, French, any one of those, they have a good starting point. So it's an incredibly useful beginning. So it's a good seed. What we have here then after Latin is we have science, and we think kids can love science. And I don't know if you love science, but we think they can do it by learning some really cool things. Totally wonderful science happens. And we learn some of those big words, even if we don't know what they do, we'll learn it later. We also have the ability, because we are in the United States, to do English. By the way, Classical Conversations has been around for 25 years and is in 55 countries. So one of the things we do is we know how to do what we do for whether you're here or whether you move abroad. And we have a lot of people who are moving out of California. And if you started with Classical Conversations here, you would actually be able to find ones in your local state if you move to a different state. By the way, stay. It's wonderful here in California, even with all our troubles. So that's what we do with English. In timeline, okay, question. How many of you taught your kids A, B, C, D, E, F, G before they could read? Yes? Singing it, chanting it, however you did it. Well, if you did that, timeline's the same thing. It's like it is a number of facts going from creation to 9/11 that are listed in a list in sequential order, just like ABC is a sequence order. And what happens is, as you're learning history, as you're reading literature, you can put your things in the timeline in the right order, and that helps you understand their context, and you can see the world holistically. How many of us wished in our subjects at school that we could make connections with other things? Doing something like a timeline helps us connect our world into one whole rather than it all disparate in parts. So we do timeline every year. Oh, by the way, you just heard me say every year. We have actually 3 cycles in our history, which is the one right below it. Our history covers ancient to medieval, medieval to modern. Cycle 1 is ancient to medieval. Cycle 2 is medieval to modern. Cycle 3 is Americas, because that's where we live. And because we do the timeline beforehand, it doesn't matter where you start, because you'll be able to put it in the right level, just like using a dictionary. You'll be able to figure out where S is and SH is, as well as AR, as well as ST, right? They're all in different places in the dictionary. And a timeline gives us the ability to put, no matter where we start in history or what novel we're reading, figure out where it appeared in the world. And I mentioned in the world, one of the other things that attracted me to classical conversations was actually the fact not all my family lives in California or even in the country. And so I love the fact that we're teaching our kids geography from a young age, because we do it with shapes, just like you do with your little preschoolers. You probably taught your kids the star, the circle, the square. You could teach them the shape of California or Florida or New Mexico, or Bolivia, which is where my brother lives. So I love that my kids were learning to do maps, not really intensely, just in the fun way of recognizing shapes. We do it with show me, tell me. I would show them California and point to it, say California. And I'd ask them to show me California and they'd point to it and they'd say California. Or if I pointed to it, I said, what is this? They would say California. It's easy and light. So one of the beautiful things about that is it made my kids love the whole world and understand where their cousins are. All right, so I said there's 5 CRISP components. One is that new grammar piece, and we cover all that material we just talked about in a half hour with song and liveliness. And by the way, it's super easy. I would love to see Lisa's question answered, because I love children's storybooks. Help each other out, share with each other. One of the things here also that we do is we do a half hour, 2 other half hours, and they're fine arts and they're science. So not only are we learning new grammar words to get better understandings, but we're getting experiences either in the visual arts or the musical arts, from the basics of it to getting to understand some of the great artists of all time or listening to some of the great pieces of music of all time. That was so rich for my kids. That was easier for me. In terms of the next one was easier for me. That was the science experiences, which was at home. I had no problem doing science, but I had a little trouble with the arts. So having a tutor who was trained to do it really helped me and my kids. In the other side of it, some of the mamas were really scared and dads were slightly scared of the sciences, and having somebody else be prepared to take them through a science experiment really helped them. Another one of the things we do that you cannot do at home easily, but that I love that you got to do, is that we have kids starting at age 4 start to public speak. Why? Because a 4-year-old who gets a new Lego set, or whose sister wins the soccer tournament, or whose dad came home from a business trip and brought them a cool thing, they're going to share with whoever wants to hear. They'll show you everything. Whereas if we start it in junior high, when our bodies start to betray us, and we become foreigners to ourselves, we don't feel as comfortable with it. So I love that my kids got to practice public speaking from age 4 in lovely, gentle ways. So we did a half hour of grammar, we did a half hour of fine arts, we did a half hour of science, we did a half hour of public speaking, and our last half hour in these 5 half hours is actually we review what we've learned, because if we're doing 12 weeks in the fall and 12 weeks in the spring, there's a lot that we're putting into our kids' life. And this was the spine of everything I did at home. So this is for kindergarten 4 years old through 12 years old. We do it in 3 cycles, and my kids did 4 through 12 in it. So one of the things about this, you're probably wondering, she's talking really fast. Really, that's all you do? Really, that's all I do. And I add a math program curriculum that works for me and my child. And really, math can be fun if you're not scared of it. So find one that works for you, and find one that actually lets your kid play games with it. One of the things we have in our catalog is Quick Flip Arithmetic, and it is a way to just use a deck of cards to play some fun math games. Math is fun. It can be winsome. Make it so, and then you'll have an easier STEM education. And then the other thing that I wanted to tell you is that if your child's not reading, help them learning to read is one of the greatest freedoms. And by the way, whether you're in a formal school setting or not, parents practicing reading aloud at home with their kids is the way kids learn to read. Parents reading to their kids with great stories, little stories, big stories, that's the way reading takes life in a home. So this is the foundation's time. It meets from 9 to noon. It meets 12 weeks in the fall and 12 weeks in the spring. And you're there so we can model to you. And then I have to be truly transparent with you. My son's favorite time of that whole morning when he was 4 and when he was 8 and when he was 11 was actually the time that came next, which was lunch. Just like any school kid, his favorite time was lunch, because that's when we would take a picnic lunch. We'd hang out as parents. We would be together. We'd share what was going on in our lives. Our kids would play together. They would play games. They would eat their lunch. And we had community. We were not alone. So that's our Foundations program. Drop questions about the Foundations program in the chat log, but I'm going to go to the Essentials program and then I'll take some questions all at once. All right, so the Essentials program is in the afternoon, and this is for kids who are 10 to 12. Because remember how I said that play sparks curiosity? We don't overly schedule our kids who are 4 through 9. Play is the game of education there. Rich play brings rich learning. But as they get older, as they get into double digits, they need a little more formalness. And so we start getting more formal with them. And we do a language arts sandwich. Our language arts sandwich starts at 1 in the afternoon and goes to 3 in the afternoon. It meets just like the Foundations program, 12 weeks in the fall and 12 weeks in the spring. The language arts sandwich starts with English grammar. I don't know about you, but I didn't really get English grammar in school. In fact, my memory of English grammar in school was my teacher had to leave because of ill health. The new teacher came in, his words were, "I hate grammar," and we never opened the books again. So when I wanted to teach my kids more about how the English language worked, I didn't have it. I hadn't learned it. That's the other thing I loved about Classical Conversations. They said, "Don't worry, we've got you. We help you learn again what you either didn't learn in school or don't remember so that you can do it easily at home. We've got this together. We can do this." So they taught me English grammar, and they do it through something called the Essentials of the English Language, which is a great grammar program. It's only done in community. You never have to do it by yourself. So you don't have to get stressed by it. You get to do it with others. And it's a bit like a Lego kit, like one of those really fancy Lego kits where at the end you have the beautiful thing, but if you just had all the pieces, you wouldn't know what to do with it. So we help you take it apart, all those pieces, and then put it back together to the big, beautiful Lego kit. So I love the Essentials of the English language. It made it much more approachable. For those of us in California where English isn't our first language, this was a great way for learning to read language and making connections with our first language. So I really love this Essentials of the English Language for both my second language learners and also for teaching myself grammar. And my kids enjoyed it too, because it was a lot like a Lego kit. The next thing we do is we do math games. Why? We do math games because muscles need a break. So we want to move away from language arts and give 30 minutes of fun in math. For those who love the language arts, just stretch them where they needed to be stretched. For those who found language arts hard, it gave them the freedom to succeed at something. The faster we are at math and good math games, when we get to Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry, trig, those kinds of things, we don't get knocked out by boredom. Because if it takes us a long time to do the computations, that's how we get out of, in high school, out of not doing the interesting, getting to the interesting part of math. And that's why we don't like math, because we're not getting to the fun stuff. So one of the things here, I love those math games because my kids loved playing them, and play is such a part of learning. So then we also then, to finish off our language arts sandwich, you do something called Institute for Excellence in Writing, and it matches our history that we're doing in the morning, whichever history section we're doing. And our kids learn to outline, they learn to take notes, they learn to cite sources, then they learn to write a paragraph, then they learn to draft a paragraph, then they learn to present what they're doing. And by the way, I told you my husband was a literature professor. We know, he knows, we need to spend better time getting kids ready to actually write a good paper. And this does that. gives them better time writing. For those people who are going into those composition courses in college, they're turning out better papers. So I love this. And I also love the play that was in it. And you see a young person with a big white beard here. We do something that's wonderful called Faces of History at the end of the second 12 weeks. Your student has picked something, a character in history. They have researched them, they've written a paper about them, and then they've changed it into a first person presentation. And a lot of times they like to dress up. And this is when we invite the community and maybe grandparents and maybe cousins in, and we get to present our person in history. And it is a wonderful, fun celebration of something well done. So this is the Essentials program. It meets in the afternoon after your kids have done the Foundations program. This is for our kindergarten 4 through 12 years old. You are there the 1 day a week in community with your student. Oh, by the way, the Essentials program is made up of about 15 students because your kids are a little older. They can handle a little bigger group and still be seen. All right, what questions do we have in the Foundations Essentials program? Colleen and Crystal, can you point some out to me if I've missed them?
I don't know if we have that many questions quite yet.
I don't see any questions.
That either means I'm speaking too fast. So if you guys are finding that I'm speaking too fast because I'm trying not to take all your morning, let me know. I can slow down. So in the Classical Conversations program is curriculum required. So we have this thing called the Foundations Curriculum Guide, and it is required. And it works a lot like a backbone. So in my own life for homeschooling, when my kids were this age, I would open that week. And let's say that week we were doing, let's say it was the week the science was doing the planets, and that we were memorizing those planets. And by the way, my kids were in this program when Pluto got downgraded, and it caused some controversy in my household about Pluto being downgraded. Just so you know, kids love to argue, and it's a good learning tool. Don't throw out the argument, just learn how to coach it nicely. But if we were doing planets, I would go to the public library, and when my non-reader wasn't reading, we'd find picture books about the night sky. And I'd get 5 or 6 of those, and we'd look at those planets, and he would listen to the audio and he would learn them, and we would read that picture book together. Then when my kids were a little older, they were reading, we'd get a biography of Galileo, or we'd get a biography of, I've just lost the name. I just saw a really good, if it comes to me, but she was a woman astronomer that discovered some of the farthest reaching bright stars, and she named them. And it was a real struggle for her to come into her own in a male culture, but she is also in our curriculum. So it's one of those things that you as a parent add to what your child's interests are, because you have this spine in that curriculum guide. It's easy. It's got places to write those important notes that you think you'll always remember that you don't, like the cute thing they said that you need to tell the grandparents, and you think obviously you'll remember it, but let me tell you, by the time your kids get into teenagers, you don't remember those cute things they said quite as clearly. So this curriculum guide is also a memory book for you, and I love that about it. So you do need that. You do need a math curriculum of some sort to run this at home well. The other thing you need, I did tell you we do music. You need a tin whistle into the key of D. It's one guide. You use it all 3 years. Crystal's putting in there. That's the other thing. We know that homeschool families usually have a lean budget. So we don't ask you to buy disposable curriculum generally. We have reusable, reuse, redeem are kind of our mottos. So you are going to have one curriculum guide. It's going to cover cycle 1, cycle 2, cycle 3. Yes, occasionally it does get updated, because did you know geography changes and borders change? Yes, occasionally it does get updated. So we do it all 3 years. And all the way 4 through 12, I bought 2 curriculum guides. One because I had to, because we updated it a little bit. The second was, or Pluto gets downgraded, right? So that required an update. But the other reason was because I was just a klutzy mom and I spilled my coffee all over my curriculum guide. So I bought a new one. So those are the only 2 reasons in those 8 years of school that I bought additional curriculum for this. So it's very doable. In the Essentials program, you do buy the Essentials of the English Language Curriculum Guide and the Institute for Excellence in Writing the history one that matches, so that you can work through with your students just like all the other parents. Yes, so the other thing I should tell you is that we have online support for both these communities. Now, we're doing something online here, but we actually believe that in person feels the most wonderful to us and our kids like it the most. And I know some of you are teachers on here and you've seen what Zoom did to education. We know that in-person education where we can catch more nuance is really what helps our kids thrive and flourish. So we are in person in our communities, even though we do talk about online here. But there are also, we know, busy parents who have lots to do and also might be working. So there's the online things where you can pull down resources if, say, you don't have the chance to go to the library for hours and browse the bookshelves. There are online resources that we use. And one of the favorite ones I've been hearing about, but wasn't around when my kids were this age, were Old Word Echoes. They are actually stories that you can read at home that have matched to our 12 weeks in the fall and 12 weeks in the spring. So you could have it shipped to your door and not ever have to leave your house and have rich things to give your kids. So that can help you if you're busy and just don't have the time, or if your library is still shut because of COVID, because I know there are a few of those like this in our area. All right, I saw some older kids in this, so keep putting your questions in the chat log, but we are actually, I see a raised hand. Patricia, what is it before I go into this?
Yes, so you probably already covered it, but I just wanted to get a better understanding of what this program is. So basically, it's a program. It's an online. It's going to be face to face once
Yes.
a week. So it's
Yes.
basically a program that we can sign our kids up for, right? For
You sign yourself
with the curriculum.
and your kids up for it. You
Okay.
both attend.
Yes, okay. Okay. So and it meets once a week
Mhm.
in face. And you
Yep,
guys
face to
person to
face.
person, face to
Mhm.
face, yeah. And then you guys provide a curriculum.
You buy the curriculum.
Or okay, through would it be through you guys?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Okay, I see.
Very
All
affordable,
right.
especially when you go
Yeah.
over 3 years. Very affordable.
Okay. All right. And you guys, I mean, because this is all new to me, and I think that
Sure.
right now I'm just learning about the different types of programs out there for homeschooling. So yeah, and you guys are Christian based. Is that what
Yes,
I'm
we are.
hearing you say?
Christ-centered
Yeah.
worldview as a
Okay.
pedagogy.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. Okay, all right. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. And Patricia, thank you so much for clarifying. Yes, let me be very, very clear for everybody that we are educating both of you at the same time because we know you're new to
Yes.
homeschooling, right?
Yes.
So you come and your student comes for the foundations program.
Okay. Yes, I
You
love
come
that.
and the essential student comes for that program because we don't want to leave anybody behind. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's why we
Okay.
do it that way. Yay.
Perfect.
Good
Thank
question.
you.
Great question. All right. Now we have some older kids on, parents of older children on here. And so one of the things that oh, so cool, Crystal. Sorry, I didn't know that about that picture. One of the cool things about this program is it started as a high school program. And when I say that, the reason I'm telling you that is most homeschoolers start to panic somewhere, parents start to panic somewhere about high school because they're like, I don't remember chemistry. How do I deal with all those tough subjects? Well, this answer is the same as it is in the foundations program. We do it in community with each other to help each other. But we flip the program because your kids are headed towards adulthood now and they really want their own voice. And we want our kids to learn to be leaders. In a Christ-centered worldview, we think that our kids will be leaders. And because they're going to have to lead towards Jesus Christ because he is the answer that solves everything. And that's just where we want our kids to end up. So we actually flip the room. We flip the room here. We have our kids start practicing a little more independence. So 4 days a week at home, they're following the challenge curriculum guide for whatever level challenge they're in, A, B, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 1 week in community, they're coming to community. And by the way, you don't have to be there, but if you drop out at this point, you won't know your kid in the future. You won't have that adult friend that we all want eventually. But that 1 day a week, they're doing a 6-hour Christ-centered worldview conversation. What did I just say? 6-hour integrated worldview, Christ-centered worldview education. We integrate across all subjects. And for those of us who came from a traditional high school setting where we switched classes, all of a sudden our brains are going, how do you do that? How do you do that? And the answer is we do it through conversation. So the community is based where the parents have community. There is a lead learner who's called a tutor who's having this integrated conversation with your children in the room. And what we're going to give our kids is that toolkit. We're going to give our kids the toolkit of skills. I don't know about you, but I noticed that careers change an awful lot, and we're doing something different than when we first graduated college or high school. So we want our kids to be able to learn anything. And so what we want to do is make sure they know the skills of learning. That way, any avenues open to them, wherever their interests take them in the future or even in the present. So we're going to practice the skills of grammar. Remember that weird word grammar? That's knowledge words. Learning knowledge words. We're going to practice that knowledge on Latin. Again, we're going to get better at it. And by the way, one of the things that I'm excited about this program, I don't know if you know, one of the most difficult things to translate when you're moving from one language to another is poetry. And what we're doing with these grammar words is our kids will start translating Latin poetry. If your kid's interested in linguistics or some of the finer points of that type of thing, getting that opportunity in high school is absolutely amazing. And it gives them such a deep appreciation for other things that are translated. And a lot of our world is. So I love that part of Latin, the skill of grammar, but we're practicing on the subject of Latin. We are practicing the skill of exposition. And a short way to think about exposition is a fancy word of exposing ourselves to ideas or exposing our ideas to others. That's a short way to think about what exposition is. So we will be practicing on literature. So we'll be reading a bunch of great literature and practices exposing ourselves to those ideas. We'll read science fiction. We'll read nonfiction, we'll read biography, we'll read poetry, we'll read theater. So we will do that in literature. We'll read short stories. We'll read autobiographies as well as biographies. I might have missed something, but all sorts of combinations of literature are used as we expose ourselves to ideas. We'll also be practicing exposing our ideas to others through learning how to write really well and create a rich base to write from. So we have not only how to say it, but we have a way to fill in a lot of what to say in it. We spend time looking at debate. All right, I had to get over there because my eyes are getting a little bit tired, getting a little older, I need new glasses. Sorry about that, but debate. Debate's one of those skills that is often thought of as negative, I guess. Many of us don't like the debates we've seen. They feel kind of too intense, not really what we want to do in education. But we are interested in our kids learning how to express their ideas well. And that's what we use debate for, learning how to formally express our ideas. And there's a weird thing we do in debate called cartography. And when I get to the next one, if you don't know that word, I'll explain that word. But just think about that a minute. If your head's wondering, cartography and debate? Are you crazy? Not really. I'll explain in a moment. Then we also are spending time practicing reasoning, and we'll practice on the subjects of logic, music theory, Socratic dialogues, and others. We want to teach our kids not what to think, how to think. So we spend a lot of time giving them multiple wrenches and hammers, toolkit for ways you can reason. So we love giving our kids that freedom because remember, we're preparing them to be adults with us in this world. And then the last thing we do is logic, because we do need to actually practice the skill, boom, 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 logic. And we use the subject of math. All right, sounds totally weird that we would talk about skills and these subjects and really abstract at the moment. And you feel free to put in questions on this. But the way this works for you as a parent, just before I go to any specific of the other ones, is that it works like this. 4 days a week, you help your student with the challenge curriculum guide. That curriculum guide tells you what you need to do at home, and then what needs to be brought to community. It is the best shopping list of education I've ever seen in terms of just oh, this is what my child needs to be thinking about. So this is something we do with our kids. And I'm not going to take you through every program here. I'm just going to flash through these really quickly. And if you have specific questions at the end about a particular one, I'll give you some of that, because I'm trying to honor our time and leave a larger time for our questions at the end. But I do want to highlight, remember how I said that we are educating our kids for their souls and for their bodies and for their minds? In the challenge program, we start talking about what virtues we're educating for. We are educating for the virtue of attention leads to ownership. Paying attention leads to your student owning the material. And we spend some time in the research strand actually teaching our kids to attend to details, to use their eyes, to look at the whole thing, and then try to take it apart themselves. And this is also where that word cartography comes up. Our debate strand here, we learn to draw the whole world as we learn attention leads to ownership. Draw it from memory. That means when your kid hears a news report or looks at some of the things that have happened in Afghanistan, or looks at the Middle East, or looks at what's happening at our borders, both north and south, and they read that or hear that with whatever radio you're listening to, they actually have something that comes into their head. They know where it is geographically. It makes more sense to them. Or when they're reading Anne Frank, what's happening in Europe makes sense in terms of location for them as well. And the train trip changes in their understanding just because they understand the geography of the world. So that's a great freedom. The other reason it's here in debate is the lowest form of debate is traditionally called either fighting or war. And if you don't understand the geographical boundaries as you're learning history, some of the wars in the past that aren't idea wars don't make sense why they happen. But when you look at the geography and the resources involved, it makes a lot more sense. So this just helps them understand their history better. In challenge B, we keep on moving, and we're saying that ownership builds discipline. And the highlight project here is mock trial. Our kids play both the prosecution and defense, and we often have outside judges that judge it. And they say our kids do as well as some of the college mock trial teams that they've seen. Do you want your kids to understand the legal system? This is a great way. Challenge 1, discipline is the cornerstone of freedom. When I can control my desires and what I want, I have more freedom to do everything I want. And one of the big capstone projects here that I loved as a parent was how it prepared me as a parent not to have a conversation next year. This happens when you're a freshman, and there's a cost of living project here. So when you're a freshman in high school, just before you get the actual license thing, because you're 14, right? We spend time and your students learning what it costs to have insurance, what it costs to own a car, what maintenance costs, what having your family over for Thanksgiving might cost. They do a whole project on that just as an exercise. And then the next year when my daughter was this age and she wanted to have a car and she wanted to do all those things, we had a much more loving conversation, because I said, so where does the money come from? Because it isn't in the family budget right now. Are you going to get a job? It wasn't, you don't want me to have a car, because she had all the knowledge beforehand from this cost of living project. I love the way this program set me up to parent the wholeness of life, because as the first with my oldest, that's your guinea pig. I wasn't quite aware that conversation would be up. We have 120 California communities, just so you know, and there is space in some of them. Challenge 2, what I want to point out to you here is that some of us are worried, concerned, apprehensive, don't know how, whatever word you want to use, about will my kid get into college? Here, at this point, we have the ability to use that same syllabus, that classical conversations curriculum guide syllabus, and a college syllabus. You would enroll your kid in the private school that has said, your syllabus is good enough. And your kid's going to do exactly what they're doing in community, plus maybe 1 or 2 get to know you assignments. If you really want your kids to thrive in a Christ-centered worldview, this is a great way to get them college credit. Because look, I'm in the university model. I have people in my life that teach at every aspect of the California university model. And there is not a Christ-centered worldview in our public schools of any stripe whether it be a junior college or a public college. So if you are interested in Christ-centered worldview, this is a great way to understand a Christ-centered worldview in a college curriculum, and it's very rich for your child. So challenge 2 is when we first start doing that, and that's super exciting. They can have almost an associate's degree if you choose that for them and they choose to do the work. By the time we hit challenge 3, we're working on the virtue that all choices bring consequences. All choices bring consequences. This is one of those beautiful things that they're now driving. They might have a job, and we are working to release them into understanding more of who they are as Americans. So there's a heavy emphasis here on American history. So enjoy that. The other thing that sort of freaks people out here is we start into chemistry. You should know that our communities that meet do labs. So the science is lab-based. So if the labs scare you, or doing a lab scares you, that's done in community with your lead learner. So that's one of the beautiful things. And most people tell me they're scared of chemistry. If you're not, wonderful. Challenge for our senior year. This is our space where we spend time letting go. And I'm going to say that isn't what's on the screen, but one of the things we as parents need to learn is that we're raising adults. And by the time they hit challenge 4, you are taking your hands off or more and more because they're getting ready to launch. And that's the way our program runs. You're under that trained tutor, your student will lead more of the seminars here in that 6-hour integrated conversation. They'll be practicing this understanding consequences defined leadership. So if your child's going to be leading the seminar on the Latin portion and they haven't prepped, they understand that if they're the leader, the consequences, their cohort of 12 students doesn't get what they would have gotten as if they prepared. It's great freedom that your child learns that in a very safe environment, rather than on some places where you may be paying thousands of dollars for college and they don't do a team project and they get the same learning lesson. It's much cheaper this way. The other thing about this that I love about this, that there's a capstone that gives your child so much freedom. There is a senior thesis. This senior thesis is your child's passion. It's something they're interested in. They write a serious research paper on it, well-sourced, and then they defend it in front of a panel. You just said my senior is going to be defending a thesis in front of a panel? Yes, I did. And one of the reasons I love this is that whether your child's writing a college application or your child is applying for a job or your child's entrepreneurial and starting their own business, they're going to have to be able to take their idea and persuade others of it. And this is something that gives your child so much confidence as they walk out into that big wide world, because they have successfully defended a thesis as the capstone of their senior year. So I have just breezed you through challenge AB 1, 2, 3, 4. It is 15 weeks in the fall, 15 weeks in the spring. It is 4 days a week at home with a guide that tells you what's to be done at home. And then your child is there for all 6 hours of that conversation, because the connections that get made through the creativity of crossing Latin with science, with the fine arts, with the debate, it's amazing what your child actually thinks of. Sometimes I wish I could be a fly on every wall because there are so many new ideas that come out. All right, you've been through, you've hung in there. The starting question you guys have already put in this chat log, you've put where you're at in the world. That is how we connect you with the local community. Like I said, we do have 120 communities in the state of California with different program levels on it. We do cap our people. In other words, if I said there's 12 students, there isn't room for a 13th. We love you, but we also love those students in the room. So we actually always will license a qualified director to start a community mid-year so that, and get them trained so that they can support anybody right now. In fact, I was on a conversation, and there may be a new community starting in Northern California in Etna in the very near future, because we have somebody who wants it near their house and is qualified. And so we're taking her through the process. So she is getting ready to start a new community. So just, if you hear not space right now, just hear the right now. We are working to get qualified people there. As you drop questions, Patricia, that's great. The zip code helps me even better just than the actual thing. Thank you. As you are thinking about this and dropping your questions in the chat log, that Crystal and Colleen will help me see, and you're wondering, oh, she talks so fast, what do I do next? Well, you could re-listen to this because I understand Donna's going to be posting it on the site that you're at right now. The other thing you could do is look at classicalconversations.com. There's more information there. The other thing, if you're a bit like me and like paper, here's some great paper. The Core. This will tell you about what classical learning is with a Christian worldview and break it down with lots of at-home ideas. I mentioned that you can have read alouds that match along that are short and sweet, but rich. That's the old word echoes. If you're interested in your kids learning some handwriting, cursive is a great way to overcome those reversals in terms of some of the things that people deal with dysgraphia and dyslexia. My son reversed all 4 directions. Cursive was the way that got him past it. Print was what he couldn't do. Cursive was what he could do. And then if your kid feels weird, there's some books that say Lily Stays Home. This is our founder's son, well, short form. Robert Bortons is the first person who went through as a challenge student, Classical Conversations. He's now the CEO of the organization, and his kids are doing it too. So not only does it have the been there, done that thing, if a child wants to do it to his own kids, that's a 5-star seal for me. And his daughter named Lily, they realized in the library there were no books about staying home for school. So there's a nice storybook there. Other early education resources that might be helpful to you. Great artists interested in art, that's a great one. Figuring out how to teach your kids about their body, this is another great one with lots of cutouts that you can copy. I referred to quick flip arithmetic. Deck of cards in this book, you have a lot of fun. Middle school. I mentioned some of the literature that we do. We do a lot of literature. We tend to use Newbery Award winners because we want quality literature to teach our kids what quality writing is. And we are always asking, what should we see in it? So you'll see some of the ones we read. And then in high school reads, we read across the genres and nonfiction as well. And by the way, I think Screwtape Letters is uniquely appropriate with what California is going through. If you have not read that, or you can find some good YouTube versions of people acting it out, it is a great drama piece. If you're an idea person, Mere Christianity is another great piece for you to think about what a Christ-centered worldview looks like, in mere not being nothing, but being the essential thing of Christianity. I don't know about you, but I don't always feel like I know what to say to my kids. So one of the things that we have are words aptly spoken. And these, so say you don't know short stories or you don't know children's literature, this takes everything that we're using in our literature strands or exposition strands, and it gives you questions as parents that you can ask. You don't have to get all of it read yourself. We're going to help you along the way, make it doable. We've got you, and we know you've got this. You were their first teacher. All right. I am at 11 o'clock. I know that you guys have been around for an hour. I'd love to take any questions you have right now. Colleen and Crystal, thank you so much for making sure those things those links are in the chat log. That's a great place to get more information. Absolutely. Okay, so my question for you while you're thinking of your question is this. What is one thing, if you were the fairy at the cradle, christening cradle, you would give your kids when they left home? Drop that in the chat log. What's the one thing you would want your kids to have when they left home at 18 or 19 when they go out into the world? Critical thinking skills. Yes, absolutely. How to think, not what to think. Discernment. Oh, yes, I love that. Wisdom. How to make the choice that blesses themselves and others. Yes.
Amanda, Lillian has a question for you.
Okay, Lillian.
Hi there. My question is kind of in regarding to the pod teachings, and honestly, to answer your question, I want to build children that are confident, resourceful, and self-sufficient individuals that are kind and they have the basic life skills, because that seems to be taken away and logical thinking is all involved in that. So that's just kind of to answer your question. And I personally have been homeschooling my own children, but also way before COVID hit, this is my third year of like actually pod teaching. Before it was even a thing, I kind of started that here in our little local community. And I've created some curriculum and other things and built a website. And at first it was just kind of quiet, and to do it within my own little pod of community. And now with all this going on, I've started to branch out and been able to share my information and knowledge with other moms. And I see that everybody's stuck. And really my encouragement is like, you can do this. You can do it for yourself. You can do it for your kids. You really can do this.
Absolutely, Lillian. We really can do this. And I'm so glad you were helping other parents. One of the things that reason why we have classical conversations on the West Coast even, or in the other 55 countries, because the vision is to help parents succeed at homeschooling. So I love that aspect. I also see Patricia's hand is up. Is this an old up or a current up?
I might have never put it down. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, I'll lower it. Thank you.
No problem.
Amanda, I have a question from Eve. How far in advance do you recommend planning ahead?
All right. The reason you see me laugh is because that's almost a personality question, right? Because some
Right.
people are so last minute that for me to make a recommendation, it just they can never think it. So here's what I would give you this. Remember how I said we will start new communities right now? If you're not an advanced planner, that's okay. We've got you. We're working to help you. That's fine. And none of us predicted COVID would be this long. Like, does everybody remember 2 weeks? Yeah, right. So none of us planned for 18 months. But one of the things I'll tell you is that when you're working your way through graduating your kids through high school, your 8th grade year is a year to think carefully about what you're going to do for the next 4. That is a great place where advanced planning really helps make your life easier. The other thing I'll tell you is that we start accepting registrations for the 22-23 academic year in February. And because we do keep our classes at 8 in the foundations room and 15 in the essentials room and 12 in the challenge room, turning your application in if you're interested earlier means you're more likely to have a spot at the community closest to you. So if that's what you mean by planning in advance, I would think February.
How do they put in their application?
Great question. So one of the things when I said we have 120 communities, that means we have directors who are leading these programs on 120 spots in the state of California. They're the one you put the application in with. One of the things, for example, communities are community. They're real life people working together. They're parents working together. We don't have you isolated. You're in charge of your kids' education, not some other person. So we spend time in community, taking care of community together, learning those real life skills. One of the communities that I was in, we helped clean the area we were in afterwards. So my kids learned to take care of the things that they actually use in an exterior space. We had one mom that had a cancer. She was battling it. And by the way, she successfully battled it, but she couldn't handle standard cleaners because of what else was going on in her system. So the director conversation was one where the director talked to her about all the things the community expected. And so she was able to say, I can't do that if you use these particular products. I have to use these products. And the community was able to meet her needs. So one of the reasons we talk to directors is so that we all know we can meet each other's needs, because we are not alone, but that means we're actually together. We're sharing ideas. We're working towards each other. We're not dropping off. We are not a service provider to you. We're not another tutoring organization that you drop your kids off. We're a parent equipping organization. So if you want to be equipped, you come to us. as a parent. And we help you love your children well in the classical Christian model of education. Yes, you can join mid-year, Crystal. We are taking applications. In fact, I had a challenge 3 student join, a challenge A student, so junior, 7th grader, and then a foundation student join 2 weeks ago. Their mom, something happened in that school. She needed her kids out now, and we were able in a week to get her into community. When it works like that, it's beautiful. And yes, we want that to work like that. All right, we have just a short moment left. Is there any burning question that if I say I'm closing up, you won't ask about classical conversations specifically?
My question is in regards to this PSA form. I don't know if you have any knowledge on it or if that's what classical conversation uses, but I'm kind of concerned if that's in the category or under the umbrella of this private school. If the mandates do go through for the public schools, Newsom's verbiage is public and private, and so
Right. Okay, so
go ahead if you have.
for those of us who are on the California side of the house, which means you are actually trying to legally homeschool your kids in the state of California, let me recommend a website called Family Protection Ministries. They have a great description of what public school is, what private school is, how we fit in the private school affidavit. I am waiting to see, Lillian, because Family Protection Ministries actually works in Sacramento, and they do a lot of things where they meet with the educational advisors on the Hill. Whether there's a carve out for the small, right? Because there's been in the past in some of the legislation that comes through that if you had under 10 students, you did not have to follow this. Or if you were actually based at your home address, you did not have to follow this. I'm also fairly confident with the things that we see happening, even here on this site, that there's quite a bit of pushback going to happen through the formal court system about private schools saying that's a step too far. But I don't know of any cases right now. So I do think it's a watch this space. It does have a pushed out date for enforcement, and I think it's a watch this space, but Family Protection has great verbiage on it. The other place that has some verbiage on it right now is Pacific Justice Institute. They're working on it with private school or Homeschool Legal Defense Association. This is a hot topic for you and for others. So those are places that I would go to get the information, and it's a watch this space time right now. We don't actually know how it's going to be enforced at the moment, and we're actually hoping it doesn't get enforced.
Thank you so much, Amanda. We actually have to wrap up.
Thank you so much for letting me be here. Can I just say a blessing over them?
Yeah, absolutely.
May the Lord
Before you
bless.
do, I'm sorry, can you just unshare your screen so we could see everybody? And
Oh, sure. Where's
Okay.
that button? There we go. There's the button. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and may he make his face shine upon you, and may you know Jesus for your very own. Thank you for sharing your time with me this Saturday morning.
And thank you all for joining us in this conversation. It was so much information. Take your time to review the video and familiarize yourself. I know, parents, it's so much. I know we get it. And that's why we're here, and that's why they're here. And so just take a deep breath, and we will get through this together, and we will find the right place for your children. At least we'll help you find the right place, because you are that partner. So amen, and thank you so much for all that information, Amanda. Thank you, Colleen, and thank you, Crystal.
You're welcome. Yeah, we're here anytime you guys need us. I know that was a lot because it was the huge breeze over from K through senior year. That's insane. So we will help you fold in wherever you want to. So we're Happy you came. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Saturday.